The entire website of Wikipedia takes up approximately 42 gigabytes of storage space. This means that if Wikipedia were printed in book form, it would take around 1,000 separate books, each comprised of about 1,200 pages, requiring about 80 meters of shelf space. Because of this, the website is bound to be riddled with strange, disturbing articles, most of which are often overlooked. However, today we've compiled a list of 5 such pages. Number 5. The Curium Case is a bizarre event involving an individual who mistakenly discovered a live stream showing the kidnapping and potential torture of a young boy. In May of 2007, a resident of Curium, located in the Czech Republic, purchased a baby monitor so that he could watch over his newborn while he was out of the room. The baby monitor worked via camera rather than just audio. The resident set up the camera when he noticed that he was receiving interference from a nearby camera of the same brand and model, appearing to be coming from his neighbor's house. Curiosity got the best of him and he tuned into his neighbor's camera. It was then that he saw a young boy lying naked on the floor, restrained by a pair of handcuffs. The resident phoned the police, to which the boy's father, Klara Morova, was arrested. The boy was then rescued and placed into a child care facility, along with his siblings. However, this is where the story begins to take a strange turn. After the children had all been adopted, one of them, a 13-year-old girl named Anna, ran away from home. While searching for her, it became known that Anna actually wasn't even the legal daughter of Klara, or a legal sibling of the young boys. She was actually the daughter of a 33-year-old woman named Barbara Skrzylova. While the details from here are a bit unclear, it appears as though Barbara had actually faked her death and created a new identity, eventually moving to Denmark. Barbara was eventually tracked down after she was found living under the identity of a 13-year-old boy. She was then arrested and sent back to the Czech Republic, where it was found that she was actually heavily involved in the torturing of the previously mentioned boy, as well as numerous other children who have remained anonymous. Because of this, both she and Klara were charged for cruelty to children. Around this time, it was determined that Klara and Barbara were not acting alone. In fact, the children's aunt, uncle, caretaker, and scout leader were all involved. It's believed that they were likely producing illicit video content of the boy and selling it online. Following this discovery, all 6 of the accused were sentenced to prison time, and the children were placed in the care of their biological father. However, just 4 years later, the children's father was also arrested. Apparently, the funds given to him to support the children were being used inappropriately, and he was placed in prison for 10 months, forcing the kids to be placed in adoptive care once again. Number 4. The Chicago Rippers were a satanic cult, suspected of being involved in the disappearance of at least 18 women in Illinois between 1981 and 1982. The group was comprised of at least 4 members, one of which was actually a former co-worker of famous serial killer John Wayne Gacy. The group first began their hunt in May of 1981, where they kidnapped a woman by the name of Linda Sutton. Linda was missing for 10 days before her body was ultimately discovered in a nearby park. She had been mutilated, with certain body parts having been removed and eaten as part of a sacrificial ritual. After Linda, the gang didn't strike again for over a year, though in May of 1982 they captured over 5 women, one of which was mutilated and dumped while she was still alive. Miraculously, she survived and is still alive to this day. Another woman also survived the attack, a prostitute named Beverly Washington. She was found dumped by a railroad track but was taken to a local hospital where she made a full recovery. She was able to provide police with an extremely helpful description of her attackers as well as the van she was abducted in. The group continued kidnapping women until October of 1982, capturing and murdering a total of 15 women in just 6 months. Eventually, the men were tracked down and arrested. While being questioned, one of the men confessed that his associate had converted his home into a, quote, satanic chapel. It was there that they took 15 of the women, severed their breasts with a wire, and placed them into a small wooden box. This man's testimony led to the conviction of all 5 members of the cult. 3 of the men, including the cult leader, are still alive today, all being in their late 50s or 60s, though one of the men was sentenced to lethal injection for his actions. Number 3. June and Jennifer Gibbons, also known as the Silent Twins, were identical twins who grew up in Wales. The twins were fictional book writers, though they eventually turned to a life of crime and were later admitted to a mental hospital, where they were held for just over 11 years. The two girls were the daughters of immigrants named Gloria and Aubrey Gibbons. Gloria was a housewife while Aubrey was an Air Force technician. The two girls were noted as being inseparable. They were also the only two black children in their community, which led them to being heavily bullied by others at school. So much so that the school leader actually gave them special permission to leave early so that they could avoid being picked on. The twins were noted as being exceptionally fast speakers, typically speaking so quickly that no one else could understand them. As time went on, this trait only amplified, making it very difficult for the girls to communicate with others. Because of this, they simply stopped. The girls stopped speaking to anyone other than each other. This led to the girls becoming eerily predictable of the other sibling, eventually causing them to be categorized as an example of cryptophagia, a phenomenon in which two twins essentially create their own type of language that can only be used with each other. This strange behavior is rarely intentional and simply onsets over time. The girls' actions were also noted as being mirror images of one another. Eventually, the girls were sent to separate boarding schools in an attempt to lessen their reliability on one another and hopefully to help them branch out and communicate with others. Though this endeavor proved useless, and when the girls reunited in their teens, their symptoms worsened. At this point, the girls secluded themselves into their bedroom and began to create short stories involving their dolls. They would often record these stories and give them as gifts to their younger sister. It was only a couple years later that the girls would begin writing their first novels after taking a mail-order course in creative writing. In the early 1980s, the girls began to express criminal behavior, which later led to them being convicted of arson. Their sentence was for them to be admitted to a mental hospital where they claimed that they were treated poorly and state that it was the worst 11 years of their life. However, while in this facility, the girls made a pact. They agreed that if one of them died, the other had to promise to begin speaking to others and live a normal life. After little debate, Jennifer agreed to be the sacrifice. Immediately after this pact was set into place, the two were transferred to another hospital. Upon arriving, Jennifer died, though not because of suicide as you might have assumed. In fact, no one really knows exactly what caused her death, and an autopsy shows that she died of rapid inflammation of the heart, though there was nothing in her system that would have caused this to take place so rapidly. This, in conjunction with the timing of the girls' pact, has caused her death to remain a mystery. As of 2008, June kept her promise and began to live a normal life. She moved out of her parents' house and into a nearby cottage, where she's no longer under mental evaluation and lives happily, all things considered. Number 2. The Craigslist Killer, also known as the Long Island serial killer, is an unknown individual who has killed at least 16 people associated with acts of prostitution, eventually dumping their bodies along Ocean Parkway near Long Island. 4 bodies were discovered in 2010, with another 6 being discovered later in 2011. As of May of 2011, police believe that the individual is acting entirely alone, though recent body discoveries indicate that there may be a copycat at work, but this has not yet been confirmed. In December of 2015, marking the 5-year anniversary of the first body's discovery, the local police announced that the FBI would be joining the investigation, though little was mentioned of the case again until just a few days ago. On September 12, 2017, the FBI stated that they have evidence indicating that John Britrolf, a convicted murderer, is involved in at least one of the murders, and possibly all of them. They're still connecting the dots, but it seems as though the Craigslist Killer may have finally been caught after all this time, though he's already serving what's essentially a life sentence, so it's unlikely that this case will develop too terribly much. Number 1. Issei Sagawa, also known as Pong, is a Japanese criminal most well known for murdering and cannibalizing a Dutch woman while in France. In June of 1981, Issei, aged 32 at the time, invited a fellow classmate, Renee, to his apartment, where she planned to assist in translating a piece of poetry for a class assignment, though Issei had other plans. Issei had described himself as weak, ugly, and small. He claims that he wanted to murder and cannibalize Renee so that he could absorb her energy. So after Renee arrived, he sat her at a desk facing away from him and asked that she began to read the poetry aloud. He then shot her in the neck from behind. Issei says that he initially fainted due to the shock of what he had just done, though when he awoke, he realized that he had to carry out his plan. He then headed to a local store, purchased a large knife, and began to cut and eat Renee. Once he had finished, he took her remaining body parts and placed them inside 2 suitcases. He then took these cases to a nearby lake where he intended to dump them, though he was caught by French police and arrested. Upon his arrest, Issei phoned his father, who was a very wealthy businessman. His father purchased an attorney for his son who helped Issei become classified as legally insane, after which he was placed in an asylum indefinitely. After evaluation by numerous doctors, Issei was determined to be sane, with all doctors concurring that his main motivation for the murders was sexual perversion. However, these determinations came too late, as legal charges had already been dropped following his admission to the asylum. Because of this, Issei was allowed to check himself out and return home to Japan, where he remains a free man. Issei's parents eventually passed away in 2005. Following this, he moved into public housing and lived on welfare for a short time. After his benefits ran out, he was forced to seek employment. In 2011, Issei spoke to a journalist from Vice magazine. In his interview, he stated that being known as a murderer and cannibal, yet still being forced to make a living, is enough punishment. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.